Hey, it's Ben. Rahul and I started this podcast because we love hanging out with fellow trial lawyers and sharing ideas that can make us all better. And both of our firms also regularly collaborate with other lawyers across the countries in cases where we can add value. If you're interested in collaboration, or even if you just have a case or an idea that you want to bounce off us or brainstorm, Rahul and I are going to be hosting confidential case workshops the first Wednesday of each month. So here's how it works. If you have a case or an idea that you want to talk about or brainstorm with us, just send me an email to ben@elawvate.net, ELAWVATE.net, or go online to elawvate.net and submit a case workshop request. We will schedule you for a confidential 30-minute Zoom meeting where we can talk about your case to see if we can help. If you feel like there would be good value in collaborating on the case further, we can talk about that. If not, that's okay too. We enjoy helping other trial lawyers because we know someday you'd be willing to do the same for us if we needed your help. So again, if you're interested in workshopping your case with us, just send an email to ben@elawvate.net or fill out a case workshop request at elawvate.net. And Rahul and I will look forward to chatting with you soon. Today's episode of Elawvate is brought to you by the Expert Institute. Rahul, you guys use Expert Institute, right?
We do use Expert Institute, and it's fantastic to get different experts in different fields, but the best of the best. And you don't know until you do the research, and they do that all for us.
Today's show is also brought to you by Filevine. Filevine has a platform called Lead Docket, which is the state-of-the-art way of tracking all of your intakes and leads, particularly if you're putting money into advertising. You don't want to waste money by missing a lead or missing a good case. It also doesn't mess up your case management software by keeping it in a different platform just focused on your leads. So check out Lead Docket by Filevine. Also brought to you today by Steno. Steno is a product you've used a lot, Rahul, right?
Steno is fantastic as a court reporting company. In addition to that, if you haven't tried Transcript Genius, it is an AI-based search engine where you can ask it questions such as, with an entire case, all the evidence on negligence, and it'll pull all the deposition testimony from all of the witnesses and put it together in a seamless way with hyperlinks to the actual text. Amazing.
And if your state law allows it, you can also defer the cost of depositions till the end of the case, which is, we were just going through our budget, and transcripts from depositions is in the top 5 of our expense items. So it's worth checking that out. Our show's also brought to you by Smart Advocate. That's the case management software we use at our firm. Our staff loves it. We love it. Very intuitive, very robust, can be adapted to do a lot of different things from mass torts down to small PI firms. So take a look at that. Finally, Hype Legal is the firm that we use for our social media and for our website design and development. We just rolled out our new website about 2 months ago that was designed by Micah and Tyler at Hype Legal. We love it. We've had a lot of great response to it. So if you want to see their work, come to our site at gideonason.com. And if you like what you see, contact Hype Legal and see if they could do the same for you. Welcome to the Elawvate podcast. I'm Ben Gideon. Rahul's off today. I'm pleased to invite Darryl Williams to the podcast today. I actually met Darryl at a conference. He was one of the featured speakers, and he just blew my mind with what he's doing. I don't want to spoil it for folks, so we'll get into that in a minute, but it involves information, AI, and what's available to trial lawyers in order to help them win their cases through access to the most important currency that we have in our business, which is just knowledge and information. So welcome, Darryl.
Pleasure.
So before we get into what you do and how you can help trial lawyers and others with information, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background? How did you get into what you're doing now? And tell us about some of the stuff you've done in the past.
Yeah, sure. So educationally, I'm accounting and finance, international business, and then a doctorate in business, but 20 years in the Air Force officer. Back in the early 1990s, you in the legal vertical have an issue with discovery. For the military and for the senior levels of government, we had something that we always called strategic surprise. You didn't want to wake up in the morning and find something happened half a world away that you should have known about. And so the problem we had is how do you negate strategic surprise when you have global flows of data? And so I had a theory back then that everything in the world is indelibly linked to supply chain. For me, supply chain is moving a widget from point A to point B. That's included, but people, places, things, money, ideology. If I could map out the supply chains deep enough, then I could predict activity with incredible accuracy. And so I created these algorithms that went through global reams of data and negated strategic surprise. No one really cared except for the government. It was a very bespoke, very manually intensive capability. But then when COVID hit, when all the global supply chains unraveled at the same time, we were asked to scale. So instead of doing 4 tasks per month, we get to do thousands per minute. And the only way to do that is to apply true artificial intelligence and true machine learning to these algorithms. Nowadays, everybody is AI. And what they'd like to do, they'd like to say, okay, we are AI, now let's find an algorithm. But we had the algorithm, so AI just enables us to do things at a much faster, deeper, and broader scale. So we are right now, we have this capability which goes through all open source, deep web and dark web, and it discovers things. Corporations are using it for discovery and asset management, but in the case of the legal field, discovery is a critical piece. You have high dollar patent infringement case, which is comprised of stacks and stacks of documents. Finding where that one comma might be misplaced is the difference between success and failure. Or it could be a jury consultation. It could be medical malpractice. So in essence, what this thing does, it discovers the critical information that the customer needs from, it doesn't matter how much volumes of data, and it does it with near 100% accuracy, so that gives the user an unfair advantage in whatever their field of occupation is.
Can you just give us some examples, some of the cases you've handled? And it doesn't have to be a legal case, problems that maybe you've been presented and how you've helped people solve them.
Sure. So, in the legal field, a couple of things come to mind. So, first of all, medical malpractice, where the particular lawyers had to seat a jury, and seating the proper jury is really the difference between success and failure. Yet, how do you know about that jury when you might only be given the list and have only 1 or 2 hours to do a deep dive? And in this case here, we do deal with medical malpractice. Having a juror that might have a spouse that is on the pension fund of a hospital that you're trying to litigate against could be a death blow to the case. Our system was able to go extremely deep within an hour into every single person on the jury pool, thereby giving the lawyers perfect awareness as to anything that could be approaching them. We had another one which was a negligence death case. And in this case here, it was a he said, she said. And our system was able to transcend the two parties and go deeper into the individual who caused the accident. And it was a tractor trailer. Go deeper into their training, all the way down to their instructors, all the way into the type of things they stress, to find out the he said, she said doesn't even matter, because what that individual actually accomplished to create the accident went against the corporate policy. But we had to go extremely deep into information that was not necessarily withheld, but not necessarily presented. And I mean, so we do that. We go into some corporations that want us to help them with their supply chains, to find out who their competition is, who are the vendors, who are globally. We've done one legal case that had global ramifications, that went through Cyprus, went through Canada, went through Luxembourg, went through everywhere else. And so there was multiple layers of obfuscation, multiple layers of hiding, multiple layers of aliases, and the system was able to chew through all of that stuff within a day or two. So it's a pretty amazing capability.
I think a lot of people are confused right now about what the term AI means. And it is, as you pointed out, it's presented in a lot of different contexts. You can now have AI that helps record your depositions and provides searchable transcripts. You have AI that can help you with legal research or research into medical records. There's obviously chat GPT and programs like that. But before we get into how the AI works itself, what is the information substrate that the AIs know about? Because you referenced the web, the dark web. I don't know, you referenced something else as well.
It's a deep web,
And it had been
yes.
my impression that the dark web was something that couldn't be searched. So just can you help us define what the information substrate is, and then maybe we can get into how AI learns about that and how you can utilize that to learn things.
So AI, artificial intelligence, it goes into the algorithms, it goes into its learning style, but ultimately the AI needs data to learn. And what you have right now, there are four. I mean, you have Chat GPT, you have Open, all this stuff, and it's generative AI. Ours is a cognitive AI, which is a little different, but generative AI. And so, if you want to put a cat on the moon, or you want to do a graphic of this over here, it's great for that. But it it learns off of available data, and so it's in essence it's taking wisdom of the masses, and it's building this big bell curve, and it says accuracy is bounded by these two lines, and that's why the most accurate you're ever going to get for generative AI is about 88%. We found that there are four verticals, four markets that require 100% accuracy 100% of the time. Of course, national security, you have legal. Legal has to have that, health services, and also financial services. And so we have a different take on learning with AI. We do is we just don't ingest everything and say, accuracy is around here. We actually ground all of our algorithms in the foundational science so that it's not allowed to hallucinate. It's not allowed to deviate, because if it does, the system will detect it and actually ferret out all of that misinformation, either nefarious or whatever. And so that is the major problem right now, is that computational power is great for AI. All that stuff is great, but how it is taught is the semblance of the problem. You have DeepSeek, which is Chinese. What they do is they have postdoc students that it's called reinforced learning of some. They have postdoc students which teach the machine what is good and what is bad. So humanity teaching someone good or bad is going to have inferences and biases and ideologies. And then you have OpenAI and ChatGPT and all those that do basically wisdom of the masses. You go on there, which one of these pictures have a traffic light in it? Click them. And so with ours, we focus more on volume and accuracy versus just pure volume and being ubiquitous to the whole world.
Are all of these products now tapping into essentially the same data pool and just processing them through different overlays and different algorithms, or do some of them have access to data or information that others do not have access to?
That's an interesting question, in that some of your AI is very focused, but you still have to teach the AI, which requires an inordinate amount of data. I would say, to answer your first question, all of them are accessing the same data. All of them. And it's almost to the point where the more data that they're ingesting, the less accurate they become. Because what you're having is you're having data where you have deliberate misinformation, you have undeliberate misinformation, and then you have, it's almost the equivalent of doing a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. So it's the same data, and as that data pool gets larger and larger and larger, the composition of error becomes greater, greater, and greater. Now you do have some groups which are now trying to focus on just legal. I'm not going to name names, but one just came out the other day. It says a hallucination-free AI, But if you look at it and you read it, it's hallucination free in the citations only. Well, that's not a big deal. I mean, it's it's your body. You don't want the AI to start making up case law that you're then going to put and send it to some judge, which is going to understand that. So what we do is we use the same data as everybody else, but our algorithms are grounded in a different way. So it already knows what absolute truth is. That's what our product is, a TIE, Absolute Truth AI. It knows what absolute truth is. So if anything deviates from that truth, it identifies it and pairs it out. And so all that you have in the stream as it comes through is absolute truth with the data.
And then that sounds very complicated to build. You're teaching some computer what absolute truth is in any possible setting. That I don't want to get into proprietary stuff, but just conceptually, how do you do that?
We have something called AI stem cells that I discovered, and that there are about 90 foundational sciences which comprise anything you could possibly want. A human being has 36 individual nuances that can be attached to science. So all those science AI stem cells then come together to make sure that things don't go awry. So for example, if someone in Facebook says that there's a cat on the moon, that then becomes part of the data stream everybody else uses. But the system knows that because of the anatomy of a cat, the coldness of space, the vacuum of space, and the composition of the moon, that the chance that there is a cat running around up on the moon is, it goes against science. So what it'll do is it'll then direct the machine to go and look at every single moon launch that was ever done by any country and said, was there a cat in any of their moon launches? Who knows? And if it comes back and says there was never been a cat, then it will then say, okay, there is no cat on the moon, and it filters it out and attributes as to who's actually submitting that misinformation. So the algorithms took 30 years to develop because we had to, you do a little bit, then you find out you've gone too far. So after the 30 years, we were able to fine tune those to ferret out inaccuracy. All that we had to do then is just apply cutting edge artificial intelligence to it to actually scale it out. So it is a complete 180-degree flip of the paradigm of what everybody else is doing.
Can you give an example of a situation where a traditional AI might come to one answer and where your product would come to a different answer?
Sure. So, for example, with Know Your Customer. So, in the fintech, Know Your Customer, anti-money laundering, we're asked to do ultra high net worth due diligence. And so there has been many instances where other AI tools that are out there will take a name which is not very common, and in the face of limited data, it will clues all those people together into one person. So there was one situation where a global bank wanted to do a test with our system, and they ran an individual in their system and they denied that person any access to a loan. It cost them scores of money, but because of risk, they said, okay, but then we ran the same person. We came up, this person is an ideal person for a loan. And after they told us that, we're crap and everything else, we then went deep into it and we were able to show them that in this Chinese province, there are actually 6 people named this person. Your system took all 6, lumped them together into one person, and 88% accurate. That's good enough. Our system actually broke all 6 into individuals and said, no, this individual actually is very good. So when it comes to entity resolution, especially in very complex data pools, our system excels.
That's pretty amazing. So back to things like the pool of information that is accessible and being searched. As a trial lawyer, one of the things that I think is frustrating with AI is, for example, if you were to ask an AI, what is my case worth? What have other cases like this resolved for? Because most settlements are confidential and not part of the substrate that the AIs are using to learn, you're not going to get very good data or response to that question, right? Is there a solution to that? And that's just one example. For another example would be confidential patient medical records. So, given this constellation of records and medical treatment, is there a viable lawsuit here? And if there is, what's the theory and what's the probability of success? Because generally, although I know patient records through various programs are available, de-identified in various places out there, I don't know if an AI can correlate those things in a way that it can learn from them. But that's just two examples of areas where in the legal sphere that I operate in, information is not generally in the public domain, and therefore you question whether AI, how much value it can add. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so the value of AI is actually twofold. I would argue the most it comes to the accuracy, but what you're talking about is the data. And so if there has never been anything released in data, the system of course cannot find it. Now what our system does, it has its own data pools too, just because after it looks at something and its accuracy, we have our own, probably the only platform out there that has its own flows of data. Now the data is completely legally procured. We don't go around firewalls or paywalls or anything else. And one of the reasons why we stood up our global headquarters in Dublin, Ireland, is because of GDPR, their data rules. But a lot of people believe that a Google or something like that is the sum total of all information, and it isn't. And so we tend to look at other data sources. We look at that. We look at other data pools.
What can you just explain what you mean by that?
We'll get Dun and Bradstreet. We'll get Open Corporates. We'll get People Data Labs. We'll get all of those established, structured data sets. We have 10 of them that we use to anchor our system, because when you do a query, you at least have to have an anchor. But then that's as far as it goes for those, because we have our own data then that fills in all the gaps. And so we will not, because of HIPAA or whatever else, we will not be able to go in and look at someone's medical records. But there's a lot of other publicly available data in the area of blogs, in the area of whatever, where all of a sudden, as it's doing a deconstruction of an individual into their 1,000 closest people, someone might say, "Hey, Susie was just in the hospital for a test," and then someone over here will say, "I just heard that Susie's MRI was pretty cool," and then someone somewhere else will say, "Yeah, Susie just got done with chemotherapy." So you have all of these nuggets around around that particular person, that the system can then start piecing things together to say, because of A plus B plus C plus D plus E, and because of the science of either chemotherapy or the science of cancerogenesis or whatever else, it can infer that you might want to ask a question about them having pancreatic cancer or whatever else. But it never forgets anything, because someone else somewhere else might have said, "Hey, my person had pancreatic cancer and someone else had pancreatic cancer." So we were asked by one legal firm to take a look for clustering of cancer, which in its singularity, no one knows, but because the system is always piecing things together, it says you not only have this person that has pancreatic cancer, but you have these other 20 that are in the same zip code, same basic water treatment plant. So now also you have a case, a lawsuit, a class action. So it's very good at putting pieces together to bring up a possibility.
If you have information that's not available in the public domain, but it can be, but as the lawyer you have access to it. For instance, you have 10,000 pages of documents for your discovery in your case, or medical records, or whatever the case may be. Can that then be uploaded into the system, and the system can process, learn from it, and then draw inferences or correlations to other information it has?
Absolutely. And then what we also have to do, so it'll do that.
And what can be gained through that process?
Well, you basically mentioned it. It could be information that is not publicly known and has never been released. And so the system will be giving you a map of everything it can find, but you as an individual might not have enough information and context to determine the goodness, the badness, or what can be next. Whereas when we receive access to a data room or access to whatever else, we first of all, that's all gated off so no one else can ever get it. It doesn't become part of any data streams we have. It is used to enrich what already has. And in that case there, with one case, we were able to do a due diligence on a piece of property that an investor was about to invest in to build a resort. The system painted a beautiful picture of ownership of that and stuff like that. But they gave us access to a data room, and from one little sentence and all of the reams of data, we were able to link two things together that was kept hidden very, very well. And from that, we were able to come back to the investor and said, you want to walk away because that area that they were about to build on was actually a toxic waste dump that was covered over, that if they would have turned the ground to build the green resort, that would have turned all that soil up again. And they were looking at hundreds of millions of dollars of lawsuits coming in. But the information about it being a toxic waste dump had been hidden actually at a governmental level since the early 1990s. So the system was all the way back in the 1980s. And that one sentence in the data room was what it needed to link it all together.
So in that case, the client brought some information to you that the system could review, and then it would take that and process it, correlate it with what it knew from external information, and draw those inferences.
The context. So when they went in and talked to the individuals in the discovery phase and said, have you given us everything? And they said, yes. And then they said, well, then they showed them the map. Their response was, after a little bit of a pause, that it really wasn't that bad. Only 2 people died. And so at that point there, it was, they just walked away, of course.
You mentioned that Google doesn't reflect the sum total of searchable knowledge out there. And then there's also this concept of the dark web, which my understanding of the dark web is there are people that have URLs that are not indexed, so they can't be searched. But that's where a lot of the unsavory activity that occurs on the web happens. But in order to find something through the dark web, you have to have the specific address and probably in some cases some kind of key or password to get to access. But is that an accurate, because there's a lot of stuff going on, I think, on this so-called dark web that you might want to know about, but is there any way that, absent having direct access to a site or a URL and knowing where you're going, to get the information that's out there?
Yeah, so the system itself doesn't go into the dark web and just search across the whole thing. It's in its process of bringing everything together. It will start piecing things together into that dark web URL. Now, legally, we are in very thin ice when you start incorporating dark web, only because some of that could have been hacked. Some of that is data and so if you start using that, then all of a sudden you put yourself liable for things. If you're using something that was illegally gained to help generate revenue, that's not good. We had a legal finding on this, and what we have found is that you can use dark web as almost a tipping and queuing, but your true data has to be at the open web, because we, in my company, we have an extreme ethical, moral, and legal boundaries that we will not breach. Now, so dark web, yeah, you can find some stuff, but you can't use that as the foundation of your map, because that could have been illegally obtained. But you can use it to tip off the system to go somewhere else.
I mean, people that are really intent on not being found or having information that isn't discoverable. So they're using, say, burner phones, and if they are on social media, they're probably avoiding it, anything that can be publicly accessed. And then they may be doing things on the dark web in a nefarious way. Are those people, what your system will do is they're looking for anything that's legally accessible and available, and then connecting dots to try to, they'd have to make at least one mistake, basically, for you to find them, right?
And I'm here to tell you that everybody makes a mistake. We had one group that had 6 layers of aliases. I mean, even their pets had aliases. But it just, the system is going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into, as it keeps building out its knowledge tree of the question. And it might be someone makes a mistake at the 12th layer away. And it could be just a simple thing where they might have linked two things. Once the system finds it and it has that one thread, it can then pull it back upstream and to unravel everything. Everybody makes a mistake. There's no one that has never, we have never found anything that has been completely ironclad, because someone will always make a mistake. And to them, it is complete innocent, but that individual who's doing something innocent doesn't realize what else is out there globally, that all of a sudden it's that one piece, it's the Rosetta Stone, which deciphers everything.
Take your playbook to the next level by joining a legal network of all-stars at psrplaybook.com. psrplaybook.com is a free digital legal library created exclusively for plaintiff lawyers by the nationally recognized personal injury law firm of Panish Shea Ravipudi LLP, and features video content showcasing the tactics, strategies, and concepts implemented by some of the industry's most successful trial attorneys. psrplaybook.com promotes learning, shared knowledge, collaboration, and best practices. Get in the game and see for yourself by joining our national network of plaintiff lawyers. Subscribe now at psrplaybook.com and learn from the best.
And one frustration that I encounter, and I think it's probably shared by a lot of trial lawyers, is that when you do juror research in advance of picking your jury before trial, there are many jurors that you can't find anything on. You look for all their social media stuff. Some people are very prominent on there and they're expressing strident points of view, and you ferret them out very quickly and you can assess which side of the decision they're going to fall on. But the people that are more dangerous are the ones, I think, a lot of times that aren't out there, that are very cagey about their public persona, and because they tend to be more close to the chest in voir dire too. They're just that kind of personality. They're not sharing. Maybe they have an agenda, but it's hard to discern it. Are there ways beyond what our typical processes are of getting, searching Facebook, searching LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever, for jurors to try to identify better information about people?
There is. I mean, the way our system does it is extremely unique. And really the way our system works is that the longer the system is used, the more powerful it becomes, because it all of these linkages, it's like ancestry.com. No one goes to any other competitor of ancestry.com because the value is in the sheer volume of everybody else using it. You might have someone that's doing a genealogy in Romania that might be the missing link for what you're trying to do in New York City. And so it is the composite which makes it the value. And so our system, since our platform has been working for so long, we can have accesses and linkages which someone else might just be ironing out. And so I don't want to give any examples, but there have been people in the past where we have been asked to take a look that have done a very good job hiding themselves, but they didn't realize that by the second or third generation of data on their family, that even if they hid their name, hid their last name, hid whatever else, the sheer total of demographics with genealogies, with ideologies, with language groups, with all that stuff now enables a picture to be painted, which discovers who, what, when, how they are.
I think one of the biggest challenges for trial lawyers with AI is that we don't know what we don't know, and therefore we don't know when we should be engaging with this technology and when it's just kind of a shiny object, because there's a lot of shiny objects out there that can distract us from our core work and business, and there's many, many vendors that are always trying to sell the latest thing. Do you have any advice for strategic use of this kind of technology, knowing what we do for a living?
You have to boil out all the hype and just ask them simple questions. What is your accuracy? Where do you get your data? I mean, no one believes, like, so for example, a high net worth due diligence, know your customer on individual, even for your largest banks, takes between 6 weeks and possibly a couple months to accomplish when we can do it in 15 minutes. So no one believes it. People think it's, and so we've done a tremendous amount of pro bono work just to have people to understand what's there. But the whole idea of the shiny object and the whole problem that you run into is that I like to take it back to the 1800s. And if you're in a Conestoga wagon going across the United States, to you, that is, your difference of goodness might be if you have a team of 2 horses versus a team of 6 horses. But if I was to show that person an F-35 fighter jet, they'd be like, that's no, that doesn't work. And so the current mindset, especially with all the tools out there that have accuracy problems, is that they'll use a tool, they'll get a green light to move forward. They'll get what they think they want, and they'll say, that's good, because they don't know any difference. It's like you said, they don't know what they don't know. But we come in and show them that, okay, this is where you're going to do a green light for risk, but here is the toxic waste dump that you were green lit to buy. All of a sudden, we have given them, in essence, information crack. They no longer trust anything unless it has. So by the use of these programs, you are going to start learning what is good and what is bad. The key point for you and your audience is you want to learn it before the learning process becomes expensive. Like if you learn it and you made a mistake, you're going to learn from that mistake, but did that mistake cost you that trial, or did that cost you something like that? That's why I'm telling everybody, look for the accuracy. The accuracy ultimately is going to be a differentiator.
But I guess one challenge is, when do you, in the process, when would you be looking to access this technology? For instance, a new case comes in. Let's say it's a trucking case, for example. You've got a big national trucking company, terrible crash, horrible injuries, different layers of corporate participation. You've got questions about the driver's training, driver's conduct, mid-level employees with supervisors and so forth. That just seems like a fairly straightforward litigation that we see all the time. You mentioned there was a case you had where someone with a similar case used your technology and it identified something in the driver's training that may have come from early on in their training with a particular trainer and so forth. But in a case like that, probably most lawyers wouldn't even think about utilizing your services, because it just seems fairly straightforward and a fact pattern they're very comfortable and familiar with. And again, we don't know what we don't know, or we don't know what can be learned that we're not aware of. So how do we, and that's just one example. I mean, you could go to any type of case, industrial accident, explosion, medical malpractice, whatever, right? How do you know when you should be looking under for more stones than what you currently do, and when investment of that money and resource in that doesn't make any sense?
Yeah, I really can't tell you that. It's going to have to come from, if what you're doing is winning you the trials, then you obviously don't need what we have. We tend to get called in when everything starts fracturing. It's not working. What can we do? But I can tell you, in the area of supply chain optimization of global corporations, usually starts with, we've got an existential problem. We need your help. And then they see the value of it. Then they say, okay, we're about to build a fact. So it starts getting moved. We're about to build a factory in this country. Can you help us with optimization? Yeah, sure. Then it gets moved a little bit more. And so to ultimately, now with some of the companies, we're actually all the way into their formation and the pre-contract bidding and analysis, just because it seems to work what they're doing now. But then when they see how deeper they can get, they want to go further and go further, go further. But ultimately, it's going to have to come down to the individual as to when they cross a threshold where payment for something new is worth that expenditure.
Do people come to you and just say, okay, here's what my case is about. How can you help me? Or do they tend to come to you with a specific problem? Like, I'm about to select a jury. I want to drill down on whether there are any jurors that might be hiding something that would be bad for my case.
It's both. We have some law firms that want to be thought leaders in their particular sphere. And so they're always looking for new and unusual ways of setting themselves apart from everybody else in the pool. And so they come to us with like, hey, we've got this idea. Would you like to try this? Sure, let's give it a whirl. Then there's others that come and say, look, we're about to do this case. We already know that our information pool is very, very limited. Can you help us with that? So there are two kinds. I mean, I just landed in Lisbon, Portugal, because one of the major law firms here wants to be a thought leader. So they want to see what can you do with this type of an AI that can make them go from the number 3 firm in the country to the number 1 firm. So it's really up to the managing partners as to what they want to do.
And what in most cases is the deliverable? Are you delivering basically a report that contains information, or?
We do a report, but they have the underlying, in addition, it's all electronics. They have the underlying sources that are there, and all the sources are cited. And then also there is since it's cognitive AI, it also gives you things to consider, questions to ask, gaps that it's looking at, things that don't make sense, so that it's not just a report. Oh, the report is nice. I think the value is more in the overarching product, which gives that lawyer the ability to do so what ifs, red teaming. You're almost deposing the system, deposing the world, that will then give you the right question to ask the individual.
What is the difference between cognitive and generative AI? Because you've mentioned that a couple of times.
Yeah, generative actually, as its very nature, it takes information and it generates something. Like I said, it's very good for graphics, very good for reports, especially if you want a B-level report. I mean, 88% when I was in school was a B. So you're not gonna wow the world, but it's good. We had one firm that wrote us a report that was supposed to be handwritten, but you could start telling the nuances of a AI generated report. But cognitive AI is, think of it as multiple thousands of generative lines that are not completely parallel. So these lines are connecting in different parts of other lines, and that gives you the ability to actually think like a human. So you can actually have context. So you have information that has contextual data in it, contextual inferences, so that you can say, okay, A plus B equals C, but because A plus B equals C in this particular way, you now can infer that D, E, and F are a possibility and G, H, I are possibilities because it gives you context. And in the military, you can't just make a decision that is linear because you have to understand consequences. And so very early on, I realized that I had to give enough information for someone to make a decision and then also understand the ramifications of those decisions. That's like cognitive AI.
So I know this is perhaps slightly off topic for trial lawyers, but as we're also humans and interested and curious about the fate of the world, I know there's this kind of existential debate now about whether AI portends the end of civilization or whether it's going to enhance humanity and bring us to some kind of utopia or something in between. Where, knowing all that you know about it and investing so much of your life into this, seeing what's out there, where do you stand in this kind of big debate on AI?
So one of the things when people see the power of our platform, usually it devolves into discussion about ethics in AI, which is a huge. So, for example, and where everyone has problems is that they are looking at ethics linearly, and so the question comes: if our platform discovers a way that we can completely move away from a petroleum-based economy, should we release that information, knowing that if we release it, it's going to collapse multiple economies around the world and it's going to go to chaos and war and stuff like that? And they're like, no, ethically, you can't do that. Okay, well, what if we find that someone else, like Zimbabwe, has a new rare earth that was discovered that will propel them to a first order nation, but at the expense of the petroleum countries? They're like, no. So the ethics is very linear. Well, the answer to that is to have a platform or have a technology that can not only help Zimbabwe with this new economy, but also give the petroleum countries a new type of economy. And so, do I believe that AI is going to be the demise of civilization? I believe, my opinion, no. I believe that what it's going to be a contributor, because what you're going to have is, if you have people which are used to that are used to saying 100% is actually 88%, or 88% is actually 100%, ultimately you're going to have world leaders making decisions with very real consequences, with the possibility of accuracy at only being 75%. And then when that 25% collapses something, their solution is going to be 75%, which is going to collapse something else, and you're going to have a cascade. So we have to change the paradigm. It's not the AI, it's the accuracy issues, which will bite us in the long run.
Incredibly fascinating discussion. We could go on for hours. I have so many more questions, but if listeners are interested in connecting with you and your company and want to take advantage of your services, how do they go about locating you?
Yeah, just go on the web, partsoul.com. There should be a contact us thing there, and that's always manned. And so all they have to do is just click on that, submit their name, and they will hear back from us very quickly.
And what is the name of it again?
Partsoul, PARTSOL.com.
Well, Darryl, thanks so much for agreeing to do the podcast. What you do is incredibly fascinating and mind-boggling in certain ways, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Well, thank you, Ben. It's been an absolute pleasure.